Picture this. It's 1877, and two of America's most respected scientists are hiring armed guards, spies, and saboteurs to wage war against each other. Their battlefield? The fossil-rich badlands of Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. Their weapons? Dynamite, espionage, and ruthless character assassination. Their prize? Dinosaur bones that would make them legends or destroy them trying. The players. Our story begins with two brilliant but deeply flawed men. First, we have Othniel Charles Marsh, a professor at Yale University and nephew of the wealthy philanthropist George Peabody. Marsh was methodical, well-funded, and had connections that reached all the way to Washington, D.C. He was also paranoid, secretive, and absolutely convinced that he was destined for scientific greatness. On the other side, we have Edward Drinker Cope, a Quaker from Philadelphia who had been publishing scientific papers since he was 19. Cope was a brilliant anatomist with an incredible ability to reconstruct entire creatures from just a few bone fragments. He was also impulsive, hot-tempered, and possessed of an ego that could fill the Grand Canyon. These two men had actually started as friends. In the 1860s, they corresponded regularly, even naming species after each other. Cope named a fossil reptile Mosasaurus copianus after Marsh, while Marsh returned the favor with several fossil discoveries. They visited each other's digs and seemed destined to advance paleontology together. But science, like politics, makes for strange bedfellows, and friendships can sour quickly when pride and money are involved. The first shots. The first crack in their relationship appeared in 1868 when Marsh visited one of Cope's dig sites in New Jersey. While there, he secretly made arrangements with the quarry workers to send any interesting fossils they found directly to him at Yale, essentially stealing Cope's source. But the real declaration of war came in 1869, when Cope made a catastrophic mistake that would haunt him for the rest of his career. He had discovered the fossil of what he believed to be a new marine reptile, which he named Elasmosaurus. In his excitement to publish first, Cope rushed his reconstruction and made a fundamental error. He placed the head on the wrong end of the skeleton. When Marsh visited Cope's lab and pointed out the mistake, he did so publicly and with obvious glee. Cope was humiliated, and his attempts to buy up every copy of his published paper to destroy the evidence only made things worse. From that moment forward, the two men were bitter enemies. The Western expansion. The real escalation began in 1877, when both men learned about incredibly rich fossil deposits being discovered in the American West. Railroad construction and mining operations were uncovering massive bone beds in Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana, areas that would later prove to contain some of the most spectacular dinosaur fossils ever found. Both Marsh and Cope immediately saw the opportunity. These weren't just scientific discoveries, they were potential paths to immortality. The scientist who could describe and name the most spectacular dinosaurs would be remembered forever. The one who came in second would be forgotten. Marsh struck first, establishing a major operation at Como Bluff in Wyoming after receiving a letter from two railroad workers who had discovered massive bones. He sent his field crews west with strict instructions to work in secret and to prevent anyone else from accessing the site. Cope quickly countered, setting up his own operations nearby. What followed was 20 years of the most intensive and destructive fossil hunting in history. The tactics of war. What made the Bone Wars so remarkable wasn't just the scientific competition, but the lengths to which both men went to sabotage each other. These weren't genteel academic disputes conducted in scholarly journals. These were full-scale operations involving dozens of workers, armed guards, and espionage networks. Both Marsh and Cope hired spies to infiltrate each other's camps. They would bribe workers to steal fossils or to report on their rivals' discoveries. They hired armed guards to protect their dig sites and to intimidate their opponents' crews. There are documented cases of fossil hunters from opposing teams getting into actual gunfights in remote canyons. The destructive tactics escalated rapidly. If a team couldn't extract a fossil quickly enough, they would sometimes dynamite the site to prevent their rivals from getting it. Both sides threw rocks at each other's excavation sites. They would sabotage each other's supply lines and steal each other's tools and equipment. Marsh, with his superior funding and connections, often had the upper hand in these confrontations. He employed up to 16 collectors at a time and spent over $270,000 of his uncle's money on fossil hunting, equivalent to about $7 million today. He also had political connections that Cope lacked, maintaining friendships with government officials who could potentially influence federal funding for paleontological research. Cope, working with more limited resources, had to be more creative. He was personally brave to the point of recklessness, often working in dangerous areas where Marsh's better-funded teams feared to go. He also proved to be remarkably quick at describing and publishing new species, sometimes beating Marsh to publication, even working from inferior specimens. The scientific stakes. While the personal animosity between Marsh and Cope was driving much of the conflict, the scientific stakes were genuinely enormous. The American West was revealing dinosaur species unlike anything that had been discovered before. Massive sauropods like Brontosaurus and Diplodocus, fearsome predators like Allosaurus, and armored giants like Triceratops. Both men were racing not just to find these creatures, but to be the first to describe and name them. In 19th-century paleontology, the scientist who published the first valid description of a species got to name it and received credit for the discovery forever. This created tremendous pressure to publish quickly, often before fossils had been properly studied. The result was a flood of new species descriptions, many of which were based on fragmentary or poorly understood fossils. Both Marsh and Cope named dozens of new dinosaur species during the Bone Wars, and many of these names are still used today. However, later research revealed that many of their discoveries were actually duplicate species or were based on misidentified fossils. One of the most famous examples is Marsh's Brontosaurus, which he described in 1879, based on a nearly complete skeleton found at Como Bluff. The name became legendary, appearing in countless books and movies. However, it was later determined that Brontosaurus was actually the same genus as Apatosaurus, which Marsh had named 2 years earlier. For over a century, Brontosaurus was considered an invalid name, though recent research has suggested that it might be distinct after all. The Media War. The Bone Wars weren't fought only in the Badlands of Colorado and Wyoming. Both Marsh and Cope understood the importance of public opinion and worked tirelessly to promote their own discoveries while discrediting their rivals' work. They wrote competing articles for popular magazines, gave public lectures, and courted newspaper reporters. Marsh, with his connections to Yale and the federal government, generally had better access to prestigious publications. Cope, with his quick wit and dramatic personality, was often more effective at capturing public imagination. The conflict reached its peak in 1890, when Cope, facing financial ruin, launched a devastating attack on Marsh in the New York Herald. In a front-page article titled "Scientists Wage Bitter Warfare," Cope accused Marsh of plagiarism, incompetence, and financial corruption. He alleged that Marsh had stolen credit for discoveries made by his assistants and had used his position with the U.S. Geological Survey to gain unfair advantages. Marsh responded with his own series of articles, painting Cope as a reckless amateur whose sloppy work was damaging American science. The public feuding was unprecedented in American scientific history and created a sensation in newspapers across the country. The human cost. While the Bone Wars produced spectacular scientific discoveries, they also extracted a terrible human cost. The conflict destroyed both men personally and professionally, and its effects rippled throughout the American scientific community. Cope spent his family fortune financing his expeditions and publications. By the 1890s, he was forced to sell his fossil collection and even his house to pay his debts. The stress of the competition and financial pressure took a severe toll on his health, and he died in 1897 at the age of 66, relatively young for a man of his social class and era. Marsh fared better financially, thanks to his uncle's wealth, but the constant stress of the competition and the public attacks on his reputation wore him down. After Cope's death, much of the excitement went out of his work and became increasingly reclusive. He died in 1899, just 2 years after his rival. The conflict also damaged American paleontology as a whole. The public feuding and questionable tactics used by both men brought the entire field into disrepute. Foreign scientists began to view American paleontologists as unprofessional, and funding for fossil research became more difficult to obtain. Perhaps most tragically, many fossil sites were permanently damaged or destroyed during the conflict. In their haste to extract specimens and to prevent their rivals from accessing